Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
Loneliness has been called the silent epidemic, and on The View, it sparked one of the most unexpected and emotional clashes yet. Country superstar Blake Shelton joined the table to talk music and life, but things quickly turned when Joy Behar raised the question, are seniors today more isolated than ever before? What began as a thoughtful discussion soon spiraled into a heated back and forth between Behar and Shelton. Blake, who grew up watching his grandparents surrounded by family and community, argued passionately that society has abandoned its elders. Joy pushed back, saying seniors now have more independence, choice, and dignity than ever before, and that loneliness is more about personal decisions than cultural failings. The studio audience leaned in as emotions escalated, with personal stories, sharp retorts, and raw frustration filling the air. And when Blake Shelton, usually known for his laid-back humor, raised his voice in anger, the set turned electric. This wasn't just about seniors. It was about family, community, and whether modern life has robbed older generations of the connection they deserve. The studio lights of The View glowed warmer than usual that morning, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. A country star wasn't the typical guest for a heated panel debate, but the moment Blake Shelton strolled onto the stage, cowboy boots tapping against the polished floor, the audience erupted in applause. He gave his signature grin, a mixture of mischief and humility, waving one hand casually as if he were greeting an old neighbor at the feed store, rather than a packed Manhattan studio. "Boy, y'all weren't expecting a country boy on this couch, were you?" he joked, leaning into the microphone with a twang. The audience laughed, and even Whoopi chuckled, shaking her head. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the calm anchor of chaos, leaned forward in her chair. "Well, Blake, we've had all sorts of voices at this table, but you're right, you might be our first cowboy philosopher." Blake chuckled, but before he could throw another quip, Joy Behar leaned in, already wearing her trademark smirk. "Philosopher, huh? Well, let's hope he has more than country song lyrics to offer." The audience let out a playful "ooh," and Blake raised his eyebrows, feigning offense. "Careful now, Joy. I've made a living off those lyrics." He pointed toward her with a grin. "Might be some wisdom in there if you'd listen." The banter got the crowd going, but underneath the light teasing was that sharp edge, two personalities circling each other before the real fight began. Whoopi didn't waste time introducing the topic. "So, today we're talking about something that hits home for a lot of our viewers. Do seniors today live lonelier lives than previous generations? It's a tough one, and I know we've all got opinions on this. Blake, since you're our guest, let's start with you." Blake shifted in his chair, the grin fading into a thoughtful frown. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice steady but firm. "Look, I grew up in Oklahoma. My grandparents lived down the road from us. Every Sunday, family came together. Neighbors dropped by. Nobody was ever left sitting alone. But now, I look around and I see too many older folks sitting in apartments, kids busy with their phones, grandkids living halfway across the country. That ain't right. We built a world where old folks get forgotten, and it's breaking my heart." The audience broke into applause, several even shouting encouragement. You could feel the sincerity in his words, the kind of perspective that wasn't polished Hollywood, but lived in, rooted in his upbringing. But Joy Behar wasn't having it. She tapped her hand on the table, leaning closer, her eyes sparking with challenge. "Blake, I hear you, but let's not romanticize the past, okay? Seniors today actually have more independence than ever before. They can travel, live alone, do what they want. My mother's generation, they were stuck in the kitchen, stuck depending on family, often with no choices. Loneliness isn't some big modern curse, it's freedom. It's people deciding how they want to live. The audience reacted with a mixed chorus, some clapping for Joy's defiant defense, others booing softly at the idea that isolation could be painted as empowerment. Blake turned to her, shaking his head. With all due respect, Joy, independence ain't worth a damn if you're crying yourself to sleep every night 'cause nobody comes to visit. You call that freedom? I call it abandonment. Gasps rippled across the audience, and the tension dialed up. Whoopi tried to ease the charge. All right, let's breathe. We've got a lot of ground to cover. But the spark was lit. Sunny Hostin, seated between Joy and Blake, chimed in with her softer, lawyerly tone. I think both of you have a point. Blake's right that we've lost some sense of community, but Joy's right too. My mother, for example, loves her independence. She doesn't want us around all the time. But that doesn't mean loneliness isn't real. It's a public health issue now, with studies showing it shortens lifespans. The audience nodded, murmuring in agreement. Some even clapped for Sunny's middle ground approach, though the tension between Blake and Joy hung heavy in the air. Blake wasn't ready to let go. He gestured toward Sunny, but kept his eyes locked on Joy. See, Sunny, she gets it. There's a difference between choosing independence and being left behind. And I'll tell you what, Joy, I've seen too many seniors who didn't get to choose. Their kids just moved on. That ain't independence. That's loneliness dressed up nice. Joy folded her arms, smiling that knowing smirk she always wore when preparing to jab back. Or maybe it's seniors saying, we don't want to be babysitters anymore. We don't want to be told how to live. You're acting like every grandparent is sitting in a rocking chair waiting for Sunday dinner. Some of them are out dating, traveling, living their best lives. Don't confuse absence of family with absence of joy. The studio gasped at the sharpness in her tone. Blake leaned back, narrowing his eyes, his easygoing humor slipping further away. Ana Navarro, sensing the brewing storm, tried to interject with her trademark diplomacy. Well, I think what we're seeing here is a generational shift. Latin families, for instance, still live multi-generational lives. Abuela is right there in the house. But in American culture at large, it's changed. Maybe too much, maybe not enough. But the loneliness is real. The audience clapped for Anna's measured words, but no one missed the silent staring contest happening between Joy and Blake. Whoopi raised her hands again, laughing to cut the tension. All right, y'all, we're only 5 minutes in, and it's already hotter than Nashville in July. We better get ready, 'cause this ain't slowing down. The audience laughed nervously, but the truth was they could feel it too. The spark had been struck. Blake Shelton and Joy Behar weren't just having a polite disagreement. They were about to collide head-on over one of the most emotional questions modern families face, and no one in the studio or watching at home was going to look away. The laughter that Whoopi had managed to stir quickly faded as Blake adjusted himself in his seat, his jaw tightening. The warmth from his entrance had cooled. He wasn't just here to charm the audience anymore. He was here to make a point. You know, Joy, Blake began, leaning forward with his forearms pressed against the table. I don't think you understand what it feels like when someone you love spends their days staring out a window, waiting for a knock on the door that never comes. I saw it with my grandmother. She had family who lived 10 minutes away, but everyone was too busy. And when I'd show up, she'd say, Blake, thank God you came. I thought I'd spend the whole week without seeing anyone. That's not independence. That's loneliness. That's heartbreak. The audience clapped, several women nodding furiously, clearly touched by the raw emotion in his words. But Joy wasn't moved. She tilted her head, lips pursed, and then leaned toward her mic. Blake, that's a touching story, I'll give you that. But let's not confuse anecdote with reality. The truth is, plenty of seniors don't want their kids or grandkids hanging around every day. They've lived full lives, and they've earned the right to be on their own terms. The problem is, people romanticize this idea of the past when in reality, not everyone was sitting around the family table singing songs after dinner. Some people were miserable in those so-called good old days. The crowd erupted, some people clapping loudly in agreement with Joy's blunt rebuttal, others booing. The division was becoming palpable. Blake straightened up, eyes narrowing slightly, though his tone carried that Oklahoma steel beneath the charm. Joy, with all due respect, you're dismissing a whole generation's pain. Sure, independence sounds nice on paper, but when you walk into a nursing home and every set of eyes follows you because you're the first person they've seen in days, that ain't freedom. That's society failing its elders. Sunny Hostin leaned in, her lawyerly tone calm but cutting. Blake's right about one thing. We have research showing that loneliness can be as harmful to seniors as smoking or obesity. That's not just a sad feeling, it's a medical crisis. But Joy has a point, too. Seniors today do live differently. They're active, they travel, they use technology. Maybe the question isn't independence versus loneliness, it's whether families are finding the right balance. Ana Navarro jumped in before Joy could retort. Balance is key, Sonny, but let's be honest, our culture does push older people aside. In Latin families, abuelas are central. They live with you, they guide you. In my house growing up, it wasn't even a question. Your parents grow old, you take care of them. Here, it's like everyone is disposable once they hit a certain age. That's a cultural issue, and it's ugly. That drew a round of applause, a few people even standing up in approval. Blake nodded toward Anna, grateful for the reinforcement. Exactly. Anna gets it. We've replaced family with convenience. Nursing homes, FaceTime calls, sending a check in the mail instead of showing up. That ain't love. That's outsourcing responsibility. Joy pounced on that line. Responsibility or control? You make it sound like every family who doesn't live in one house under one roof is failing. Guess what, Blake? Some families don't get along. Some parents weren't great parents. Some grandparents are toxic. Are you saying kids should sacrifice their lives just to sit in a room with someone who mistreated them their whole childhood? Gasps filled the studio at the rawness of her words. Blake froze for a beat, the muscles in his face tightening as if she'd touched a nerve. Then he leaned in, voice low but sharp. You know, Joy, I don't think you understand what it feels like when someone you love spends their days staring out a window waiting for a knock on the door that never comes. I saw it with my grandmother. She had family who lived 10 minutes away, but everyone was too busy. And when I'd show up, she'd say, Blake, thank God you came. I thought I'd spend the whole week without seeing anyone. That's not independence. That's loneliness. That's heartbreak. The audience clapped loudly, the cheers almost drowning out the tension. Joy shook her head, lips curling at that half smile that could cut through steel. Families are supposed to show up, sure, but that doesn't mean they're chained. The reality is we live longer now. People are raising kids later, working longer hours, dealing with more financial strain. You want to talk about seniors being lonely? Let's also talk about adult kids stretched so thin that they can't take care of themselves, let alone mom and dad. Anna interjected again, her voice a mix of exasperation and passion. But Joy, that's exactly the problem. Our system is broken. We've made family care optional instead of expected. If you're stretched thin, why? Because society values profit over people. That's why seniors are left behind. It's not just individual choice, it's a cultural one. Sunny Hostin nodded. And it's why policies around elder care are gaining traction. Some argue we need structural solutions, not just family guilt trips. But that doesn't erase the emotional truth Blake is talking about. Blake sat back, frustration visible now, his usual easy smile gone. "I'll tell you what, Joy, I'm not talking about policy. I'm talking about human decency. You can dress it up however you want, but if you can't pick up the phone, if you can't drop by, if you can't show up for the people who raised you, then what are we even doing here? What's the point?" That line hit like a hammer. The audience erupted in applause, standing ovations breaking out in scattered pockets. Joy rolled her eyes, but the defiance in her body language said she was ready to go another round. Whoopi held up her hands again, her voice calm but weighted. Okay. I think it's safe to say this ain't just a debate. This is personal for everyone here." She glanced at Blake, then at Joy. "We're going to keep unpacking this, but folks, I think the temperature at this table just went up about 50 degrees. The camera zoomed in on Blake's stern face, then Joy's unbothered smirk. The battle lines were drawn, and the audience could feel it. The clash wasn't just heating up, it was about to catch fire. The studio was crackling with a kind of tension you could almost see. What began as a spirited debate had transformed into something raw, personal, and volatile. The topic had stopped being a neat question for discussion and became a battle of worldviews. The studio lights bore down on the panel, and the audience leaned in, sensing they were about to witness something unforgettable. Joy Behar, her voice sharper now, leaned across the table. "Blake, you're making this out to be a Hallmark movie. Seniors aren't lonely because we lack country songs or because kids move to the city. They're lonely because of neglect, period. Our society has become selfish, and unless laws or social policies step in, nothing changes. Families need to be held accountable." The word neglect hung in the air like a stone dropped in water. Blake's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, his deep voice cutting through the murmurs in the crowd. "Joy, I gotta stop you right there. You can't throw that word around like it's just another talking point. My mama's in her late 70s. She lives alone back in Oklahoma, and every Sunday I call her. We talk for hours. I fly her out whenever I can. You think she's lonely? You think I'm neglecting her? Don't stand there and paint every family with the same broad brush." The audience gasped and then applauded. The air was alive with divided loyalties, half siding with Joy's hardline stance, half nodding along with Blake's impassioned defense. Joy, unfazed, shot back. "Blake, you're a millionaire. You can afford to fly your mom out. You're not the rule. You're the exception. What about the truck driver who barely makes ends meet? What about the nurse working double shift who can't afford to take their mother out of a crumbling apartment? Don't tell me love alone fixes loneliness. Money and systemic support matter." The applause this time was mixed, some loud, some hesitant. Blake's voice rose, the Oklahoma drawl now rougher, heavier. "You're right about one thing, it ain't easy. But I've seen folks who don't have much still make time. It's not about plane tickets, it's about showing up, sitting on the porch, calling after work, dropping by with groceries. Love is the cure, not another government policy that's going to get lost in paperwork." Joy's face hardened. "That's naive, Blake. You're romanticizing a problem that's killing seniors. Isolation leads to depression, health problems, even early death. And you're telling people just love each other more? That's a cop-out. Families need to be pushed, not coddled." The words cop-out landed like a slap. Blake's face flushed red. He slammed his hand lightly on the table, startling even the camera operators. "I've been through divorce, Joy. I've seen families fall apart. I've seen people drift away because they couldn't fight for each other anymore. Don't tell me I don't understand what it takes to keep someone from feeling alone. I've lived it, and I sure as hell won't stand here while you call people's love a cop-out." The audience roared. Some cheered, others gasped at his intensity. The clash had gone from intellectual sparring to a confession of wounds. Joy, surprisingly calm in the storm, tilted her head. "And maybe, Blake, your divorce is exactly why you can't see it clearly. You keep putting the burden on individual people. But what about seniors who raised kids that don't call back?
What about the ones who did everything right, gave everything, and are now sitting in nursing homes with no one visiting them? Are we just supposed to shrug and say, well, love failed them? No, we need structural solutions. Blake's eyes darkened, and his voice dropped lower, but the fire didn't leave it. You know what I hear in that, Joy? Excuses. Excuses for why kids don't call their mamas. Excuses for why people don't look after their dads. You can blame the system all day long, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the choices we make. And if we don't choose to love our own parents, then we've already failed. No policy can fix that. For a moment, silence fell. Even Joy didn't jump back right away. It was as if the studio itself had inhaled and forgotten how to breathe. Then Whoopi cut in, trying to soften the temperature. Okay, this is powerful stuff. We're hearing two truths, folks. Families matter, systems matter. Maybe both need to work together. But Joy wasn't done. She leaned in, her finger lightly tapping the table. Blake, you keep saying love is enough, but love without action is just a word. Seniors deserve more than words. They deserve a guarantee. Blake, eyes locked on hers, didn't blink. And I'm saying, Joy, that guarantee doesn't start in Washington. It starts at the kitchen table. The studio erupted in cheers and boos, split right down the middle. One half shouting Joy's name, the other yelling for Blake. The View had turned into something closer to a town hall than a talk show. And at that moment, it wasn't just about seniors, or loneliness, or laws. It was about the fundamental question. Who do we owe more to, our families or the system? The emotional flashpoint had arrived. No turning back. The stage had become a battlefield. For nearly half an hour, Blake Shelton and Joy Behar had gone back and forth, each volley sharper than the last. But now the debate teetered on the edge of collapse. Joy leaned in, her voice rising above the hum of divided applause. Blake, you're acting like this is just about family dinners and phone calls. That's easy to say for people who have good families. But what about the countless seniors abandoned by their kids? You can't legislate love, but you sure can legislate responsibility. Blake's lips curled in frustration. Legislate responsibility? You mean forcing grown kids to take care of their parents whether they want to or not? That's not love, Joy. That's punishment. If you have to pass a law to make somebody pick up the phone, then you've already lost the real battle. The audience clapped loudly, but Joy wasn't backing down. She pointed straight at Blake, her eyes sharp. And that's where you're blind, Blake. Not everyone grows up in your front porch small-town family. We live in a world where people are too busy, too self-absorbed, or too disconnected to care. Without rules, without pressure, seniors become invisible. And maybe you don't want to admit it, but love doesn't pay the rent on a retirement home. The words sliced through the studio. Blake sat back, stunned for a second, then leaned forward, his hand gripping the table as his voice broke through. Invisible? My mom ain't invisible. My grandparents weren't invisible. And you know what? They didn't need a law to make me care. They needed me to show up. That's what family is. If you take that choice away, if you make it about laws and not love, then you've stripped the heart right out of it. The room erupted, half the audience cheering Blake, half shouting Joy's name. The chaos only fueled the fire. Joy raised her voice over the crowd. You're living in a fantasy, Blake. You're lucky you had people who showed up for you and you showed up for them. But millions of seniors don't have that. They sit alone, waiting for calls that never come, in houses where nobody visits. And if you think a pretty song or a Sunday phone call solves that, then you're not facing reality. We need enforcement, not sentiment. Blake shot back, his voice cracking with anger now. You don't get it, Joy. You're talking about enforcement like it's some cure-all. But no law in the world can force somebody to care. You can't drag love out of a courtroom. You can't fine somebody into compassion. What you're talking about is control, not care. The audience gasped. His words struck deep, and the tension was electric. Joy fired one last shot, leaning close enough to almost touch his arm. And what you're doing, Blake, is giving people an excuse, telling them, oh, just love your parents more, while seniors die of loneliness. That's not compassion, it's denial. Blake froze for a moment, staring at her. His voice dropped lower, but the fury was still there. Denial? Let me tell you something, Joy. I've buried family. I've stood in empty houses after the laughter was gone. And the one thing I know is when the end comes, no law, no government, no panel of talk show hosts is going to fill that silence. Only family can. And if we don't start teaching people that, then we've already lost. For a beat, the studio fell into silence. The audience, the hosts, even the crew seemed stunned. Then Joy gave a cold little laugh, shaking her head. Well, Blake, if you think preaching about love is enough, and maybe you should stick to writing songs. This is the real world. That was the line, the breaking point. Blake's chair screeched as he pushed it back, standing tall, his face red with anger. You know what, Joy? I've had enough. You don't want a conversation, you want a fight, and I ain't gonna sit here while you mock people for caring about their families. I'm done. The crowd gasped as Blake ripped off his microphone, tossed it on the table, and stormed off the stage. The audience broke into chaos, cheers, boos, stunned silence. Joy sat back in her chair, her smile tight, while the camera stayed locked on the empty space where Blake had been just moments before. The clash had reached its breaking point, and now the aftermath would echo far beyond that studio. The studio felt hollow in the moments after Blake Shelton's walk-off. His chair sat empty, the microphone abandoned on the table like a dropped gauntlet. Joy Behar adjusted her papers, trying to appear unfazed, but the tension in the air was undeniable. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the anchor, leaned forward with a sigh that carried the weight of the entire stage. Well, Whoopi said, her voice low, that was something. The audience let out a nervous ripple of laughter, but it quickly faded. The clash had gone beyond a heated exchange. It had touched a raw nerve that people in the studio and at home were already living. Sonny Hostin, who had stayed quiet during much of the blow-up, finally spoke. You know, this isn't just about whether Blake was right or Joy was right. This is about what families are facing every day. Seniors are living longer, but too many of them are living alone. And whether you believe in laws or in love, the truth is, we're not doing enough. Her words seemed to soften the edges of the chaos. Some audience members nodded. Others sat stone-faced, arms folded. Joy, still bristling, leaned back in her chair. I don't regret saying what I said, she replied sharply. This is real life, not some country song. If we don't push people, if we don't put structure in place, then we're leaving millions of older Americans to rot in isolation. That's not harsh, it's the truth. Her words drew a mix of boos and claps, but without Blake to fire back, the energy shifted. Whoopi stepped in again. Joy, you're not wrong that seniors are struggling, but Blake wasn't wrong either. He's saying love and family responsibility should come from the heart. The question is, what do we do when it doesn't? It was the heart of the debate, boiled down in one line. At that moment, something surprising happened. A woman in the audience, gray-haired and trembling slightly, stood up. The cameras instinctively found her. She clutched the microphone handed to her by a stagehand and spoke into the silence. My name is Carol. I'm 74 years old. I raised 3 kids. And you know what? They don't call. They don't visit. I live alone in an apartment and I spend most of my days waiting. Sometimes I turn on the TV just to hear voices in the room. So when Joy says we need rules, I get it, because love didn't show up for me. The audience hushed. A few gasps rippled through the studio. Even Joy blinked, caught off guard. But then, another voice cut through the air. This time it was a younger man, maybe in his 30s, seated near the back. He held the mic like a lifeline. "My mom lives with me. She's 68. I cook for her, we watch TV together, and sometimes I even take her to work with me. It's not always easy, but she's my mom. I don't need a law to tell me that. I do it because she raised me, because she matters. And I don't think the government can create that kind of love." The two testimonies, the lonely mother, the devoted son, hung in the air like dueling truths, both painfully real, both impossible to dismiss. Joy pressed her lips together, visibly shaken. She shifted in her seat, her usual sharp wit softened for once. "Carol, I hear you, and I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to wait by the phone." It was rare for Joy to drop her guard, but even she couldn't deny the gravity of Carol's story. Whoopi seized the moment. Maybe the point isn't about choosing one side or the other. Maybe the truth is that some families will step up, like that young man back there, and others won't, like Carol's kids. So maybe it's not just about laws or love. It's about building a culture that doesn't forget people when they get old. The audience broke into applause, not the rowdy, divided clapping of earlier, but a unified sound, heavy with emotion. The cameras pulled back, showing the empty seat where Blake had been, the faces of the co-hosts, still processing, and the audience on their feet. It was an outro that wasn't really an ending at all, but an open question left hanging in the hearts of everyone watching. Were seniors destined to live lonelier lives than generations past? Or could love, not laws, turn the tide?